The letter is 4 pages long, and it is not a confession. It is a data set. According to the account that comes down to us, Dr. William Bailey, a country physician in rural Vermont, sits at his desk in the autumn of 1928 and writes out a schedule. Dates in one column, numbers in another. The numbers are rising. He is not guessing that someone is poisoning him. He has been measuring it. For months, he has been clipping his own hair and sealing it in envelopes. He has been collecting his own urine and running it through the same crude tests he was taught in medical school, the ones used to catch arsenic in a stomach after a body is already cold. Except the body is his, and it is still walking around. He seals the letter, addresses it to his attorney, and instructs that it be opened only after his death. Inside, he names a person. He names a method. He names a delivery vehicle. The evening tonic he takes for his stomach, the one prepared for him in his own house. 14 months later, William Bailey is dead. A local physician signs the certificate. Cause of death, gastric fever. The letter stays in a safe for 2 more years, and nobody opens it because nobody knows to ask. To understand why a man would test his own hair instead of simply leaving town, you have to understand what a country doctor was in 1928. Vermont in this period is not empty, but it is thin. Farms sit miles apart. Roads turn to mud in spring and vanish in winter. A single physician might cover a territory of several townships, delivering babies in kitchens, setting bones by lamplight, and signing death certificates for people he has known his entire life. He is not just a doctor. He is a kind of civic instrument. His signature closes estates. His word decides whether a death is natural. And critically, he is often the only person for many miles who knows what a poisoning actually looks like. That is the first strange thing about this story. The victim is the one person in the county trained to recognize the crime. Accounts describe Bailey as methodical, somewhat isolated, and financially comfortable by rural standards, which in that era usually means land, a house, and an estate worth arguing about. He was, by the surviving descriptions, a man who wrote everything down. Ledgers, case notes, weather. It is the habit of a man who trusts paper more than memory. That habit is about to become the only reason anyone ever hears his name. Because in the winter of 1927, William Bailey starts getting sick. And he starts, quietly, keeping a different kind of record. Here is what chronic arsenic poisoning does, and here is why it killed so effectively for so long. It does not look like poison. It looks like life. It begins with the stomach. Cramping, nausea after meals, diarrhea that comes and goes, then a burning in the throat, a metallic taste, a thirst that water does not fix. Then the hands and feet start to tingle, then to burn, then to go numb. A creeping peripheral neuropathy that patients in that era often described as walking on needles. The skin darkens in patches. Small hard spots form on the palms and soles. Hair thins. Weight falls away. And the whole thing arrives in waves, so the sufferer improves, believes it is passing, then collapses again a week later. In 1928, every single one of those symptoms had a respectable, innocent explanation. Gastritis, nervous exhaustion, bad water, influenza, something eaten, something going around. That ambiguity is precisely what made arsenic the poison of choice for most of the 19th century, to the point that it earned a nickname in the popular press: inheritance powder. It was cheap, it was legal, it was sold as rat killer and fly paper and weed treatment, and it sat under the sink in half the households in America. What separates Bailey from the thousands of victims before him is a single detail. He notices the pattern in himself. And then he does something almost nobody in his position ever does. He stops treating it, and he starts investigating it. Arsenic has one weakness, and it is chemical. The body treats it partly like sulfur, and the protein that builds hair and fingernails is packed with sulfur bonds. So arsenic binds into keratin as it grows and stays. Hair does not detoxify. Hair does not forget. A strand of hair is a timeline, laid down at roughly a centimeter a month, with the poison locked into it at whatever level was circulating when that segment formed. This was known science by the 1920s. The tests to detect it were older still. The Marsh test dates to the 1830s, and it is the reason arsenic stopped being an undetectable murder weapon. A sample is treated with acid and zinc. The arsenic converts to a gas. The gas is passed through a heated tube, and it plates out as a dark metallic mirror on the glass. The Reinsch test is simpler and even more within reach of a country practice. A strip of clean copper dropped into an acidified sample, warmed, and the copper takes on a dull gray film if arsenic is present. Neither is precise by modern standards. Both are real, both were achievable in 1928, and both were the standard of the era. Accounts suggest Bailey ran versions of these repeatedly, on himself, in his own office. Hair from the same spot each time. Urine samples logged by date. He was not building a case for a courtroom. He was building a curve. And a curve tells you something a single positive result never can. It tells you not just that you are being poisoned, but when the doses land, how large they are, and whether they are getting bolder. There is one more detail, and it is the coldest one. He kept taking the tonic. Why keep drinking it? We cannot ask him, and no honest account of this story should pretend to know his mind. But the letter itself implies the logic. A rising curve only exists if the doses continue. If he refuses the tonic, the poisoning stops, the evidence stops, and he is left as a man with a suspicion and nothing else. Worse, the person doing it simply changes method. So he chose, apparently, to become his own experiment, to keep the channel open, to let the numbers climb high enough that no coroner could wave them away. What he wrote to his attorney was not a plea and not an accusation in the emotional sense. It was structured. It named the person he believed responsible. It named the vehicle, the evening tonic prepared inside his own home. It laid out the dosage schedule, dates against measurements. And it instructed that the letter remain sealed until his death, at which point it should be produced. Think about what that instruction actually admits. He is writing a document that only becomes useful once he is a corpse. He is not writing to save himself. He is writing to convict someone afterward. He seals it. He hands it over. And then he goes home, to the same house, to the same table, and he waits 14 months. He dies in the winter following. The attending physician records the cause as gastric fever, and it is worth being fair to that man. In 1929, in a farming county, that is not negligence. It is the vocabulary of the time. Gastric fever was a catch-all for anyone who died after a long stretch of vomiting, wasting, and abdominal pain. It covered typhoid, it covered ulcers, it covered a dozen infections nobody could culture. Rural New England in this era largely still relied on local physicians and lay coroners to certify death. There is no toxicology screen. There is no autopsy unless someone insists and pays. And nobody insists because the deceased has been visibly, publicly ill for over a year, in front of the whole community. Everyone watched him decline. Everyone can testify to it. The poisoning did not have to be hidden. It had already been explained, by the illness itself, to every neighbor in the valley. He is buried. The practice closes. The house is settled. And the letter stays exactly where he put it, because an attorney holds a sealed instrument, and a sealed instrument is opened when the process requires it, not when curiosity does. For nearly 2 years, the only complete account of a murder in that county sits in the dark, in a safe, 20 miles from the grave. What finally pries it open is not a detective. It is money. An estate fight is a boring, grinding thing. Heirs disagree. Property is contested. Wills get challenged. And when a will is challenged, everything the deceased left in legal custody comes into play, including sealed documents held by his attorney. That is how the letter reaches a courtroom in 1931, not as evidence of homicide, as a probate exhibit. And then it is read aloud. Imagine the mechanics of that room. A dispute over land and furniture, and then a sheet of paper that names a living person as a murderer in the victim's own hand, with dates and measurements attached. The problem is that a letter, by itself, is close to legally worthless. It is hearsay from a man who cannot be cross-examined. Its author cannot be asked how he ran his tests, whether his reagents were clean, whether he made an error. Any competent defense attorney tears at exactly that seam. What a letter like this can do is force the one thing that actually settles the question, exhumation. And here the chemistry works in the dead man's favor. Arsenic does not decay with the body. It persists in hair, in nails, in bone, for years, for decades. A body 2 years in the ground still carries the record. If the hair still holds the pattern he described, the letter stops being a claim and starts being a prediction that was confirmed. The surviving accounts of what the Vermont court concluded are thin, and honest history has to say so plainly. Some tellings hold that the case collapsed on the burden of proof. Others suggest a settlement quietly ended it. What is not disputed is the sequence. A man documented his own poisoning, predicted his own death, and was proven right by his own corpse. Bailey's case matters less for its verdict than for its timing, because he was working at the exact seam where poisoning stopped being safe. For most of the 1800s, arsenic murder was nearly unpunishable. The substance was everywhere, the symptoms mimicked common disease, and the science lagged. Then it began to close. The Marsh test made detection possible. In 1919, the physician R.A. Mees described the transverse white bands that appear across the fingernails of the arsenic poisoned, a visible clock printed onto the body. Through the 1910s and 1920s, cities began replacing political coroners with trained medical examiners, and toxicology moved from a curiosity into a profession. By the 1930s, a death like Bailey's in a major city would likely have been caught. In a Vermont farming county in 1929, it was not. That gap between what science already knew and what a rural death investigation could actually do is the whole story. Bailey stood inside it, saw it clearly, and tried to bridge it with the only instrument he had left: careful documentation and his own body as the sample. William Bailey could not stop what was happening to him, so he did the only thing his training allowed. He made it impossible to call it natural. He turned 14 months of dying into a record, and he trusted that a piece of paper in a safe would outlast the person who wanted him gone. Whether the law ever delivered on that trust is uncertain, but the document did its job, which is why we are still saying his name a century later. If you want more stories from the era when forensic science was still catching up to the crimes, stick around. There are plenty more where this came from.